Hello and welcome. I'm Mary Fran Johnson, your moderator for this session on driving a culture of innovation with Janine Charlton, who is the Senior Vice President and Chief Technology and Digital Officer at Merchants Fleet. Thanks so much for joining me today, Janine.
Thanks for having me, Mary Fran. Glad to be here.
Let's start out with an update on how your business is doing in these very challenging times. What's driving Merchant Fleet's growth in an industry that is otherwise struggling?
The company's doing great, Mary Fran. In case you haven't heard, we recently announced that we signed a definitive agreement to be acquired by Bain Capital and Adia. So pretty exciting times. When it comes to our growth strategy, we're really not afraid to think and act differently when faced with challenges and finding creative solutions. A great example of that would be at the onset of the pandemic. We had financial sponsors telling us that it was going to be impossible to raise capital. And as you can imagine, being an asset intense based company, we really didn't want to hear this news.
Yeah.
So, despite that advice, we made the bold decision to launch a campaign that we were open for business because we felt that we had a responsibility to help our clients keep their essential businesses moving. So, we worked creatively to find money in market. And actually, we were successful in raising $370 million of capital during that time. And as a result of that, our businesses continued to thrive. We've made a bold commitment also to lead in the electrification of commercial vehicles in the industry. And I think we're really proud of the fact that we've invested $2.5 billion in existing reservations for over 40,000 electric vehicles.
hmm Tell us a little bit about the size of the fleet that Merchants Fleet is actually managing. You are the fourth largest fleet management company in the US and Canada.
That is correct. So the approximate size of our fleet would be close to 60,000 vehicles
Mhm.
from a fleet perspective, as well as a number of services that would accompany those vehicles.
Well, and this decision to go into electric vehicles was not an obvious one when it was being made, was it? I mean, it was more of a bet for the future.
Absolute bet in the future and a really bold decision, right, that we made to kind of lead
Mhm.
in this space for our clients.
Now, as we've talked before, we've had a lot of discussions about the very rapid business growth that you've had, especially in what you're doing in the digital business transformation areas. How do you manage that as the chief technology and digital officer, especially when it comes to finding the talent that you need?
Yeah, I would say to kind of put the growth in context, right? We really had our best year ever in 2021 amidst all of the challenges with the pandemic, supply chain challenges, chip shortages. And we were actually able to deliver 8 million packages per day throughout North America as,
Mhm.
by vehicles managed by our fleet. And this really has put digital transformation at the core of our strategy, right?
Mhm.
I think our team's winning blend of innovation, service, and support has put us at the forefront of fleet tech, really making it an attractive place for tech talent to want to work.
Okay.
I think that coupled with the fact that we're really working on several innovative offerings, as an example, our Total Connect solution, which is kind of taking all of the embedded technology in a vehicle and being able to harness the value of those data assets to drive results for our clients.
Mhm.
Adopt EV is another one, right? Our decision to lead in electrification. So these new technologies, I think, make it a very attractive place for top talent to want to work, coupled with our above market benefits.
Mhm.
I would say, though, that kind of given this, right? So we're leading in market, we're innovating, right? We're working on new technology. So it's an attractive place to be. But we've really been faced with some challenges to secure top talent as well, kind of given the competitive landscape that's
Mhm.
out there. So we've really had to make the decision when hiring to make quick decisions, right? Because oftentimes candidates are coming in with several offers in hand as they're going through the interview process, right? So you've got to be really quick to respond and to represent kind of the true opportunity to the candidates in a real-time fashion.
Yeah. Well, and you have to also be able to reflect very accurately on what the company culture is like. because I know that's one of your big selling points. What's an example of something you talk about with candidates that kind of demonstrates what your culture is like?
I think, the thing that really kind of stands out is that we have a culture that's really anchored around innovation, right? And
Hmm.
so I think we think about innovation in our company in terms of not just kind of the big ideas that a small subset of employees within the company get to work on, but that every single employee across our company base has an opportunity to innovate. And I think it's those really small innovations that drive impact not only for our clients, but perhaps in terms of improving an operational function across the company. Everybody feels like they get a chance to contribute in a really meaningful way. And I think that's very different than I think a lot of other companies, and certainly companies that I've been affiliated with, really truly think about innovation. It brings, I think, great satisfaction to everybody's work.
Hmm. Excellent. Now, when we talk at all these days about the future of work, I think we're often talking about the emerging models for hybrid or flexible workplace schedules. How has that been evolving at Merchants Fleet? I mean, you have a lot of the work that you do is not necessarily something you can do remotely. So talk a little bit about that, about how the whole hybrid and flexibility approach has been evolving.
Sure. We really have a broad mix, I would say, within the company, not just in the technology function, but across the company in terms of our model, right? Where we've moved to fully remote, you could be in a hybrid model, or you could be in the office on a daily basis. So we've kind of got an approach put in place that, depending on your role, it's going to influence what model is really best suited, I think, for your role. And I would say this really hasn't been easy as we've tried to figure kind of what the new normal needs to look like based on your role and how you make all that come together to be successful for an organization. But we've really worked hard, I think, to drive employee engagement across these various models. So a couple of examples of that would be when we do company-wide events, we really design our events to think about both those that are on site versus those that are remote. So we want our virtual events to really emulate a very similar experience for those that would actually be in the office.
Yeah.
And then we also look for opportunities to have, I think, purposeful in-person events for those that are remote to really foster kind of relationship development and to deepen the collaboration, right? I think it's really, really difficult depending on your role, right, to think that you could be 100% remote all the time, right? When you're working on a new initiative, I think it's really important to be able to establish those relationships with your team, with your business partners as well, because I think that's going to drive productivity. And I think it's certainly going to increase job satisfaction as well.
Yeah. Well, and you use those two magic words, employee engagement. That's something that CIOs are just so much more focused on, or maybe it's risen higher up the list of all the duties and the things you have to juggle. Talk a little bit about your views on how the CIO's role has been changing when it comes to engaging with employees. You're doing some things differently today than you did probably 3 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'd start by saying that, first of all, I want to acknowledge that I don't think any of us have all the answers, right? I don't think that we've necessarily cracked the code that says, okay, here's the playbook on what employee engagement needs to look like. So
Yeah.
I often tell my teams, right, that you got to be comfortable with being uncomfortable on this topic, right? And I think you've got to really lean in and look for new ways to engage to help nurture that engagement. And it could look different depending on the type of initiative that you're working on. But I think CIOs really need to focus on developing and fostering a great organizational culture, right? That I think is based on collaboration, transparency, and innovation,
Mhm.
and really having a clear purpose that I think goes beyond profit. Because I think while profit is extremely important,
Mhm.
employees want to feel that the work that they're doing matters. And I think the more that they can feel that, the deeper their engagement will be, as well as their job satisfaction. I
Yeah.
would say the other thing too is that you want to make sure that your function, right? Those of us that work in technology your function needs to be seen as a trusted business partner. I think that's a really critical component to this conversation as well.
Yeah.
And then I think the final thing that I would say is that engagement is tied directly to job satisfaction and retention. So I think it's really important to look for those opportunities to enhance overall engagement. It's a never-ending, I think, conversation.
Right, right. Well, when you mentioned and you said something about the new normal, and I can't think of another time in any of our work histories where the new normal was so much of a moving target. You know, it's not necessarily something you can peg down and say, as you said, that nobody has all the answers to it. A lot of the CIOs I've talked with, we've had discussions about, you know, the move to agile ways of working, you know, whether it's using agile oriented technologies or even just entire business agility, trying to operate that with a hybrid mix or even in a fully remote kind of mode can be really difficult and present new challenges. What sort of things do you do to encourage the face-to-face team interactions these days? And how have you been managing the agile approaches to the different projects and programs you're working on?
Yeah, I would say kind of the challenges around this and kind of where remote work has gone takes it to a whole nother level of complexity, right? I think for those working in tech, we've always worked with offshore partners, right, that are by and large remote. They're not on site kind of with your teams or with your business partners. So that part of it, I think we've always been used to. But you take that now coupled with, right, the fact that even the employees that are part of your team or strategic partners that, you know, are onshore are now remote or in some hybrid model. So coupled with even your business partners that you're engaged with are in some kind of a hybrid model as well. So the level of complexity has gone to a whole nother level, right? That I think a lot of people underestimated just what that was going to do to kind of the sheer interaction of how teams work, how productive they are kind of at the onset of their work. So we've worked to try to find ways to find those touch points where connecting in person on a periodic basis is critically important, right? I think at the kickoff of a project, you're nearing an important completion of a milestone. You want to celebrate a milestone. So how do you look for those opportunities to bring either the whole team or parts of the team together, right? That you can build those face-to-face relationships. Yeah. Now, a way that we've been able to do that is we've provisioned kind of budget in order to allow for that to happen, right? Because I think if you don't do that, and if you're very budget conscious or don't even have the dollars to do that, then that, you know, that is going to make having those in-person kind of connection points, I think, extremely difficult. So I think the more opportunities you can find for those kind of purpose-driven interactions, you've got to do it. And you've got to try to do it at the right point in time that makes sense for that particular team.
Well, and I know from just previous conversations we've had, I know that being your focus on high performing teams or high performance teams has always been a real hallmark of your own career as a CIO. And we spoke about one specific challenge that you had encountered, that idea that expectations can be a bit unrealistic about being productive from day one once something is launched. How did you, what was this issue you encountered at Merchants Fleet, and how did you solve for it?
So the challenge that we've encountered is because our business is on this rapid growth trajectory, right? And we're heavily investing in our digital transformation strategy as a company, right? We've invested more in technology this year than we ever have before. So the sheer number of initiatives has increased significantly. And so as a result of that, right, we're bringing in many new team members to launch these initiatives. And so you've got a lot of people that perhaps don't know your industry, because we're hiring a mix of those that work in the industry versus those that don't. And you've got new business partners, right, that perhaps haven't been involved in tech projects before as well. So the combination of this makes for an interesting challenge in terms of how do you get these teams productive as fast as possible, right? And in today's world of everything is instant, right, we've got this expectation that you're productive day one. Well, that's proven to not be the case. And so we've kind of taken a step back and we've focused on our onboarding process is one kind of tenet to this activity in terms of how do we make sure that new team members gain the knowledge that they need in a way that's going to be consumable to them, that's going to add to how productive they can be. So we've developed what we call our Fleet IQ program, right? Where it's a mix of you spend time with our business partners, there's kind of videos that we've put together and in-person discussions that we make available to our employees as part of this onboarding process. Additionally, we've paired employees up with what we call a buddy for a period of time so that they are able to ask questions in a safe environment, learn how to navigate within their team, within the company, in a way that's going to be beneficial to them as well. And then we've really focused on some broader kind of initiatives around just training and what does it really mean to be a part of a high performing team. And so I've partnered with HR. We've done some LinkedIn learning kind of training that we've assigned to employees around what it means to be a part of a high performing team. And then the final thing to kind of round that out that we did is that we've facilitated workshops where we actually talk about this and we talk about, what have we done well to build these high performing teams and where do we have opportunities for improvement and how do we kind of share those lessons learned more broadly across the tech team.
Yeah. And that really is a different level of employee engagement. And it reminds me of that, when you said the buddy system, I thought of that bestseller from years ago, Everything I Know Today I Learned in Kindergarten. It's some of that.
Back to the basics, huh?
Back to the bed. Talk about the real basics, But it also, what you describe is genuinely a culture of learning, which a lot of times companies talk about it. It's certainly something that HR executives find very popular to talk about. But to actually walk the talk on it takes a lot of effort on both parts, especially for all the senior executives to get on board with that. You had mentioned that you are also a fan of one of Jonah Berger's book, Contagious, Why Things Catch On, and that has been, is that something that you do as assigned reading to the other execs or to your teams?
We have done it as assigned readings to the leadership team. In fact, our CEO had us read it along with several other books and kind of do a formal report, like a book report. So kind of going back to the basics, Mary Fran, right? Which was really kind of interesting. We also hired Jonah to come in and do some training with not only the leadership team, but with our sales team as well. And it's been very, very impactful to kind of see the impact that that's had on the organization. But, to your point about learning, it's really embedded in our culture as a company. In fact, we've implemented what we call a Learn IQ program. So as a company, we've gotten away from more of the tuition assistance kind of a model, and we're more into this, what we call micro credentials that we've labeled as part of our Learn IQ. So all employees have an opportunity to take a micro credential on an annual basis as part of this continual learning and how we're going to invest in our employees, really to allow them to keep their skills current.
Yeah.
And it's been very effective.
And I think you mentioned that you've taken advantage of some of this.
I certainly have. And I think for those of us in technology, right, I view myself as a lifelong learner. You're never really done, right? In the pace at which technology is changing, I think it's really important as the leader of tech for the company to set the example. So last year, I actually took 3 micro credentials myself. So not one, but I took 3. Some would say you might be a little crazy, like how did you find time to do it? But I think it's proven to be extremely valuable, and I'm about to start one. Actually, today it starts where I'm taking a micro credential at MIT, and it's on neuroscience for business. So it's really kind of understanding more about the brain and how people work. And my theory there is the more you can understand that in terms of leading teams, and back to the point of how do you build high performing teams, I'm hoping that there's going to be some really good learnings that come out of that will help kind of my leadership this year.
And the three credentials that you've already earned, what were they?
So I took a course at Harvard on sustainable business strategy.
Mm-hmm.
I took a second course at Harvard on artificial intelligence for business leaders. So the thinking there is how do I help the company really understand the digital transformation journey that we're on and the role that they play.
Great.
And then the third one that I took was related to just kind of ESG as a whole through Competence Boards. And I received a global ESG certification.
Well, excellent, excellent. It sounds like you're three people instead of one. So kudos to all of that. Now, one of the innovation examples that we talked about earlier was showcasing the IT and business team collaboration that you focus on at Merchants Fleet. It's something called Condition Assessment Solution. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So in our mobility side of the business, right, we have a need based on the fact that this is more kind of short-term rentals that we offer to our commercial clients.
Mm-hmm.
And as those vehicles are coming off of their short-term lease agreements, we have to conduct what we call a damage assessment process. So that we can kind of assess any damages, get those vehicles reconditioned, and then get them back on the road. So we took what was a really costly and time-consuming manual exercise and transformed it into a digital process that really harnesses the power of artificial intelligence, powered by a damage assessment engine. So the result of that activity is that we were able to complete a vehicle condition assessment 21 days faster than we were previously, right? And we were able to, as a result of that, recapture 11,000 what we call billable months. So that generated, millions of dollars to the bottom line. So really what this resulted in, we call this one of our small innovations because it really was kind of a small solution that had just a really major impact, right, to our business. But we were able to reduce the cost of the vehicle inspection process by 80% and standardize our process as a result. Really, really significant impact. And we've been able to, from here, kind of ideate on some additional use cases as a result of this technology that we've built. So we're not done yet. We're just getting started, but pretty big impact.
Well, it doesn't sound small at all. I mean, when you finish describing it there. For our wrap-up question here, what do you think has changed the most in your own overall leadership style?
I think for me, right, the biggest change, there's a couple of tenets to this, right? I think we've gone through probably the biggest societal change, at least I know that I personally have gone through ever, right? And I think as a result of that, it has really kind of increased the rate at which digital transformation has to occur, right? I think it was a big eye opener, right, in terms of really what that did to companies at large and really kind of forced many, many companies to kind of double down on their digital transformation. So I think for me, and part of kind of the learning, the Learn IQ courses that I took is how do I get not just the tech team, but the entire company on board with our digital transformation strategy? So I think it starts with me, right? I've got to set the example. I've got to be knowledgeable in this space and be willing to lead by example. So I think it was really leaning into that and taking a much broader perspective in terms of really, really what that means.
Yep.
I think the other kind of component of really what's changed for me is employee engagement. And I think the whole kind of approach to hybrid and remote is something that I've never experienced in all of the years that I've been doing this. And so while we haven't figured out all the answers, I'm really open and transparent about it, and perhaps even somewhat vulnerable in terms of the approach that I take, the questions that I ask, to really try to figure out what's the right approach so that we can continue to deliver results for our company and retain, right, great talent to deliver on those expectations.
Yes. Excellent. Very good answer. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
And also, thank you for joining me here today. It's been a really great conversation with you, Janine.
Thanks for having me, Mary Fran. Always enjoy the interaction with you. Thanks so much.
Excellent. Okay, and thanks to our audience for joining us as well. And for Foundry, I'm Mary Fran Johnson.